Well, stocks were buffeted early on, even though it was largely expected when British Prime Minister Theresa May spelled out her intentions to make a clean break from the European Union.
We seek a new and equal partnership between an independent, self-governing global Britain and our friends and allies in the EU. Not partial membership of the European Union, associate membership of the European Union, or anything that leaves us half in, half out.
All right, the British pound still up on all of that. Daniel Hannan, European Parliament member, joining us right now. Daniel, what she said was, we want out of the European Union, not out of Europe. Can she get at that?
Oh, sure. I mean, we have an immediate interest in the prosperity of our European friends. You know, prosperous neighbours make good customers. So the last thing we want is to leave in a way that is going to kind of collapse the EU in chaos. But she's also made it clear that we're going to run our own affairs. We're going to be good neighbours. They can always rely on our military support, our diplomatic, our commercial ties. But we're going to live under our own laws, and we're not going to try and cling on to some kind of partial membership.
So where is all of this going? You know, a lot of people watch it closely here, Daniel, as you know, because the same populist wave that brought that about, many argue, is the same one that brought Donald Trump to the White House steps on Friday. Now, what do you make of that and how this ultimately fares?
I wouldn't push the analogy too far. I mean, you just had a program, you just had an item on the jobs staying in the US, and I think a big part, as I understand it, of Donald Trump's platform was that, you know, he didn't want a free trade deal with China. Whereas a big part of ours is that we did want a free trade deal with China. We do want one. We can't get one while we're in the EU, and we intend, as the Prime Minister keeps saying, to be a global leader in free trade. But one area where I hope the two come together is on a bilateral US-UK trade deal. I mean, there's a really obvious one. We're linked by language and law, by business practice, by accountancy practices. 1 million Brits every day turn up to work for American-owned companies. 1 million Americans every day clock in to work for British-owned companies. You're the single biggest investor in Britain. We're the single biggest investor in the US. The only thing that hasn't been able to follow up until now is the trade, because up until now, the trade has been controlled by Brussels rather than by us. And I'm delighted that the President-elect has indicated that that's now going to change, and that we can form that natural market that ought to exist between us.
Well, in the meantime, you have the Chinese complaining about the language they hear out of the President-elect here in this country, Donald Trump, and that, I'm cutting to the chase here, is going to lead to trade scuffles, trade wars. What do you think?
Well, I think that would be a very bad outcome. A trade war between the largest and the second largest economies in the world would be disastrous, and it would particularly hurt some of the people who were among the most enthusiastic of Donald Trump's voters. A trade war always ends up hurting the people on lowest incomes first. And so I hope that there is a way of remembering what really raised the US to greatness, which was engagement in the world commercially. You know, buying and selling is something that you guys have been really very good at, and wherever it's practiced, it always raises living standards for everybody.
Right now, there is this push, this populist wave across the world. You and I have gotten this before it began, essentially in your country, and it's gone from one country to the next, most recently our own. And I'm getting a sense from some economists I talk to, not that they're the most reliable folks, but that the world is building economic walls, and that can't long-term be good. I think what they're referring to, the populist way that they say is everyone is doing what's out for themselves, to benefit jobs in their country, and this global kind of approach to the economy is gone. What do you make of that fear?
I mean, it is a worry. You know, the last thing we want is kind of Smoot-Hawley 1930s type beggar my neighbor. It was that turned what should have been a financial crisis into a prolonged depression. You know, free trade works every time. In the 19th century, it turned my country into the wealthiest place in the world. In the 20th century, it turned Singapore and Hong Kong from steaming, mosquito-infested islands into gleaming city-states. It's now working its magic in Chile, in Australia, in New Zealand. It works every time, but it's counterintuitive, and you have to keep making the argument. And I'm afraid during your recent presidential election, we saw how difficult it is to make that argument, because there are always isolated groups of losers, and they're very conscious that they're losers from free trade, and they vote accordingly. But the gains are dispersed, and although almost everyone does better, very few people attribute their good fortune to the free trade deal. They tend to attribute it to themselves, and that's the political problem that people like me as elected representatives face. We have to show that it's working for everybody, and it's particularly working for the little guy.
Daniel, if I could ask you a dumb question, what happens to you as a European Parliament member if this thing is concluded the way the Brexit votes want?
I will be unemployed, and I will heave a great sigh of relief on the day of my redundancy, because I'll be released to go and do something more productive in a year or two's time when it comes into effect. So if there's any Fox viewers now, any Fox Business News with any job offers out there, let me know. I'm a newly unemployed MEP with lots of skills to bring to it.
Something tells me you do not have to worry. But Daniel Hannan, European Parliament member for the time being, thank you very much. Good seeing you.